Hello, my name is Kathleen Hahn, and this is my report over mandated reporting. So the Federal Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, otherwise known as CAPTA, requires each state to have provisions or procedures for requiring certain individuals to report known or suspected instances of child abuse and neglect. These individuals are designated as mandated reporters, and they typically have frequent contact with children. Some of the most common professions are teachers, principals, nurses, counselors, many of us that are in class. Nationally, approximately 4.1 million reports of suspicion of child abuse and neglect were referred to Children's Division in 2017. Out of that, 674,000 children were identified to have substantiated reports of child abuse and neglect. Educators were responsible for reporting 19.4% of those reports, which leads the amount of reports for all professional reporting. It is almost certain that an educator will need to make a report of suspicion or neglect at some time during their career. So these are two reports that I'll be discussing in correlation with some of the problems that mandating reporting has. So Maureen Kinney completed a study in 2004 to determine teachers' knowledge of all issues surrounding identification and reporting of child abuse and neglect. She surveyed 200 teachers in the Southeast. She used a questionnaire that specified in knowledge concerning signs and symptoms of child abuse and neglect, laws, and procedures for reporting. Of that study, the results were astounding. Only 34% of those teachers reported that child abuse was covered in training. Most teachers were unaware of the signs and symptoms as well as reporting procedures. Kinney also came to the conclusion that in general, teachers reported a lack of awareness of the signs of child abuse and reporting procedures, and it can affect their ability to report cases. So the next study that I'm going to talk about is concerning sexual abuse and teachers in Australia calling that in. So the authors on this study, they completed a study on the knowledge and identification of sexual abuse, which is the hardest form of child abuse to identify, according to their study and many other studies that are done. They were looking to identify the pre-service training and education of student teachers that they received during school. So they used 56 student teachers that were in their final semester in Queensland, and they completed a 5-page questionnaire consisting of 10 statements about identifying and calling in sexual abuse, about their training and reporting. So once again, the results of this study were crazy. Out of all of the questionnaire, those 10 statements about their knowledge, 45 to 70% of each of the student teachers did not learn about any of the policies of sexual abuse out of the 10 categories that they talked about. What's even more crazy is that in just 3 short months, those student teachers who participated in the study will become qualified teachers and ready to start working in the classroom with very little training on how to handle concerns of abuse or neglect. So those are two of the main studies about the problems. I also want to follow it up with 2 solutions. So I actually picked these 2 studies in particular because the authors several years later in both of these cases came back and tried to figure out solutions to mandated reported problems. So these 2 studies are by the same authors several years down the road, but these are what they are working on towards solutions. So the first study is backed by Maureen Kinney. So she previously found that teachers were unprepared when it came to reporting concerns of child abuse and neglect. So in this article, she starts to focus on some of the solutions that can be done. So she completed her study with 105 education and counseling major students. They completed a 1-hour web-based training on identification of signs, symptoms of child abuse and neglect and reporting. And they took a pre and post test on the materials discussed to test their knowledge. So the results of this study showed that students' post-test scores were significantly higher than pre-test scores, which shows the effectiveness of a brief online tutorial in regard to child abuse and recognition and reporting. To me, that just sounds crazy that just a simple 1 hour web-based training can provide so much knowledge and helpful at that. And then this next study is done by Goldman and Grimby. They did the second problem study in Australia. So previously, they described that student teachers had very minimal training. And in this article, they started to look into solutions. So they did their study a little bit differently. They went back to the school and they came up with a questionnaire that to involve students with and the preferences they have in the education about mandated reporting. So they asked, it was a 5-page questionnaire again, and they asked different scenarios about what type of studying, how they should study, whether it be online, in person, whether it be over a few days or just a few hours. And they involved students in the same school district to see what they would want and how they learn best. And so the results that they came up with showed that these students felt that practical, contemporary, and integrating learning models delivered in short, concentrated face-to-face studies over a two-day time span would be the most effective form of education for them. So on that note, these are still students and they would like to do this training during school. So they think that during the beginning of their school, they should have a 2-day face-to-face education, and that would help them learn more about child abuse and neglect and how to identify it. So in conclusion, I found that many researchers are very dedicated to working on the problem that is facing many mandated reporters today, and the solution is just more education. The researchers that I used both identified problems, and they both went out and tried to find solutions for those problems. Research is showing that educators lack awareness of many things surrounding child abuse and neglect. However, research also shows that the resolution can be quite simple. If more education is implemented while still in school, these students will continue to learn. So that is all I have in regards to my presentation. Thank you guys for listening. References are up. If you have any questions, please leave some comments.